and I can't afford to go to the emergency room. It's the US, I'm not covered for that kind of stuff. And I was like, screw it. I'm not leaving. They're like, you need to go. I'm like, no, I'm going to work. I'll be visiting my hometown and country for the first time since I've been gone in almost a year and a half. The idea of seeing my family and friends again is bittersweet, and this is the longest I've ever been away from where I grew up. So I thought it would be fun to talk about how, why I left, and where I went to. So I grew up in a small Appalachian Trail town in Virginia, about 10 minutes away from Tennessee and Virginia state lines. And when I say small, I mean 614 people marked on the 2019 census. Small. You might be thinking, why does this matter? Connections. And by that, I mean there were none. As I grew up, I fell in love with the creative arts. I loved to draw, paint, play guitar, piano, film everything, take pictures, sculpt, you name it. The activity revolved around bringing something into this world. Other than a child, I wanted to learn the skill. I was fascinated with all aspects of creation. And when I was 16, I managed to acquire my first camera, and that's when my love of videography began. I would run around filming vlogs and dumb skits, and all of them were pretty much garbage, but I loved doing it. There was something about being able to take the visions that I had in my head, put them into a medium where I could show other people exactly what was running through my head. It was like magic, and I didn't know it at the time, but that's the closest I would ever come to it. My entire high school graduating class was less than 100 people. 75% of them were rednecks, only interested in chewing tobacco, diesel trucks, and toxic behavior. There wasn't any opportunity to network with other creatives because they didn't exist. My friends were there to help me with small tasks, but there were no other souls that shared my same creative drive. I was alone in a sea that meant nothing to me. I can't say that it was entirely bad, though. It forced me to rely on myself for all things, and in doing so, I learned how to do much more than if I grew up with other people to work with. If I needed a 3D model for a project, I had to learn how to make it. If I needed an illustration, I had to learn how to draw it. Need a photo edited, I had to learn how to edit and get the point. I think that this is what led me to where I am today. All the hard work I put in years ago, garnishing skills I never knew that I would need professionally. So I graduated in 2012 from high school, and I started my journey out in graphic design in college, community college. And I thought that would be a good stepping stone because before I went off to university and spent all this money, I could take classes at a community college and get things out of the way for cheaper. So I was like, yeah, this would be a great idea. And I think it was a year that I spent there doing graphic design. And at the end of it, I was like, at the end of the year, I sat there and thought, why am I going to spend all this money to get a job that's not going to pay well? And I could do this with a good portfolio. I could work hard, do really good work, have an awesome portfolio, and maybe I don't need a degree. So at that point, I was getting into personal training, and I did that for about a year. And it was fun. I was working at a health food store, and I don't look it today. I've lost all my size because I don't work out anymore, but it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. It was really healthy. And the second year of my community college is when I spent that doing dietetics classes, so that was good. And by the end of that year, I sat and I thought, it's so frustrating to make dietary plans and all that stuff for people, and they don't follow it. You know what I mean? Spend hours coming up with a meal plan, and then they complain that they're not seeing the results they want when really it's their own fault. And I don't know, I couldn't put up with it. After all of that, I ended up going into pharmacy. So my dad knew a guy that was a pharmacy manager at a Walgreens, and I messaged him, reached out to him, and Said, if you need someone to work, I'll do it. So I did that for 2 years actually, and it was an all right job. The one thing I didn't like about it was it made me not like people anymore. So if you go to a pharmacy, you're either sick or you're addicted to medication. Usually people that go there aren't healthy, so they're always in a bad mood. And I've had my life threatened multiple times working there. So that was fun. But, I did that for 2 years. I ended up going to East Tennessee State University for a year, studying pharmacy. And the school would have cost me $250,000. Yes, 250,000 United States dollars for 4 years in college. So I was like, no, thank you. I am not interested. But I did it for a year, pre-pharmacy, and it was actually one of the worst years of my life in college at ETSU. I didn't have any friends. There was only one friend I had the entire time I was there. But it wasn't fun. It wasn't good. I didn't like it. So after that, I started this journey in the creative arts, and I said to myself, I was chasing money. You know what I mean? I wanted to get a job that made a lot of money because I wanted to take care of those around me, and I wanted to make sure I was financially secure for my future. It's completely normal. But in doing so, I gave up a large part of me that, at the time I didn't realize was so important, and I lost myself along the way. So it's one of those things that, looking back, how awful it was, it's very, very important to my development, or it is now, that I went through that, you know what I mean? That I could see both sides of that. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go back to school because I don't have any money, but I would like to get into film or get back into the arts. So that's what I did. I bought myself a decent camera, started messing around with it, just doing a little bit of stuff here and there. I ended up taking a job where I flew around the country doing electrical control engineering. And I didn't know anything about it, but it paid very well. It was terrible for my mental health, but I did that job for about a year. And as bad as it was, there's a couple good memories, so that was fun. I got to see a lot of places in the US, so it was cool. But, obviously it wasn't for me. It was meant to be. But it was a good year, made a lot of money. I had a lot of friends when I came back home because I had a lot of money and I would just spend it on them, So that was cool. And when I quit that job and ran out of money, no one was around anymore. So that's how that goes. But after that, I started working at a Hobby Lobby. And, why not? Arts, crafts, whatever. And that was about a year-ish. No, it wasn't a year. It wasn't a year. I think that was a couple months, maybe half a year. But the people I worked with there were really cool. I had a good time. It just also dealing with the public wasn't for me. So after that, I started working at an electricity company with my dad because he's been an electrician for 20 years. And I was like, you know what, why not? And, the pay there was awful. Like for the manual labor and everything I had to go through, it's terrible. It sucked. But, working with my father and my brother worked with him at the time as well was invaluable. Looking back on those memories and getting a chance to work that closely with my father would, is really nice. I look back on that fondly. But it was really at this point in my life that I decided to do something, Like I said, growing up in a small town and there was nothing where I'm from, like even professionally. If you want to do anything, you have to leave. And that's a lot harder than people make it out to be. So I was like, God, what am I going to do? I really like acting. I don't know if I could be an actor. I've never done it. So I was like, screw it. Let's go for it. And just because, why not? And I thought it would be fun, So I made a Backstage account, which for those of you that don't know, it's just like an online platform where they find job listings or wherever, and these talent agencies say, we need this. And then it's kind of like a middleman for employment, essentially. And, I started applying for things on there, sending in videos and going to casting calls and stuff like that. So I got a few calls back. I never got anything, but I didn't do it very long. And I started, at this point, writing notes to put on my walls. I would write, you can do, whatever you want. You're capable of everything, or just something random. And I would put it on the inside of my front door. So every time I left the house, I had to look at this note just to remind myself to keep going, and that, you want to get out of here. You can't live here the rest of your life. It's sickening. It's terrible. And so I kept applying for acting positions, and on May 2nd of 2019, I got an email from a production or a talent sourcing agency in New York City, and it was an opening for a brand ambassador, I think, for $20 an hour. And I was saying needs help like setting up the green room and the stage stuff. So it was more like a production assistant listing. And it was in Nashville, which at the time was 6 hours? 2 hours? No, 6. Yeah, 6 hours drive from me, where I currently lived. And it was like a Friday afternoon. And I had to work. So I was like, well, you know what? Screw it. So I called into work and drove 6 hours that day to go down to Nashville to work at this job that I knew nothing about, in hopes that it would lead to something. And by golly, it did. So I'm not going to name the company because I still work for them and I don't want my identity all over the place. But when I got there to Nashville, I started working and they really liked me. There's also this scar I have on my thumb here. So you can't see it because it's directly on the fold of my thumb. It goes like here. The producer, when I got there, the first thing she told me to do was, hey, can you cut some of those avocados? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I'm an avocado master. And needless to say, that didn't end up well. It did not work out. So, I seen these cooking things where they cut the avocado open and they slap the pit and twist it and pull it out. And I've done this before with big knives. But they had just bought a new pack of knives, and one was tiny. So I cut the avocado in half and I go to smack it. And the knife cuts right through the seed and cuts my finger to the bone. And it just it was bad. It was real bad. So I drove 6 hours to get here. And I can't afford to go to the emergency room. It's the US, I'm not covered for that kind of stuff. And I was like, screw it. I'm not leaving. They're like, you need to go. I'm like, no, I'm gonna work. So I get some gauze and some tape and I wrap it up. It looked like a baseball bat, just walking around. So that was cool. And I'll be danged if I had to drive all that way for nothing, because then if I go to the emergency room, I can't show them how awesome I am and I'll never get another job and blah, whatever. But the night went on and, I helped out. And this show is a 20s show. So everyone comes and they're dressed up like 1920s, and it's like a Gatsby party, and they travel the world, like 20 different countries, and it's really, really cool. I was like, wow, that's really neat. They have like all sorts of acts and crazy stuff, and I was like, this is really awesome. So I worked really hard that night, and I messaged the producer after it was over. I was like, hey, if you need any help on your future shows, I would love to come along, etc., etc. And she was like, cool. And she invited me out the next day to a cookout. And I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, I was going to drive home that night, but it was like 3 a.m. at this point. She's like, I'll get you a hotel. So they got me a hotel. I stayed there and woke up the next morning. I went around the Nashville Mall, got some new clothes because I didn't bring anything with me. So I bought some new clothes. Went to the cookout, had fun with everybody there, and they were really, really cool. And, I went home and we kept in contact. And then she's like, hey, we got a show in Houston next weekend. If you want me to fly you out, we can. I was like, okay, sure, why not? And that pattern repeated itself to Los Angeles, San Diego, and I flew to Montreal. And at this point, the producer and I kind of started seeing each other. Like we didn't say it was official yet, but we were flirting and all of that. So she ended up, after the Montreal show, she came back. She flew to Tennessee to see me, and we hung out for a couple weeks, and she flew back to Berlin where she lived. And the company's based in Berlin, or was. And we kept talking for a couple months, and she came to see me again. She flew back out to see me. And then we decided that I was going to move to Berlin and see her and continue working for them. So, when we started dating, it was pretty much official. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm leaving the US. So I flew to Berlin. I moved in with her because, like I said, she was living there at the time. And, I started going on tour with them that year and dating her. So the paperwork needed to move anywhere in the world is ridiculous. It is way harder than it has to be and needs to be. But I mean, that's just life. I guess even trying to get into the US is difficult. And, so we started flying around, doing our shows, having a good time. And I was like, this is great. Then Corona happened. So that put a damper on everything. And I started making ASMR, which it spawned my ASMR channel. So there's that, which was very awesome. I'm very blessed to be a part of that community as well. And, we were hoping to start going back on tour this year, but it's hard to say with, COVID, see what happens, But anyway, when COVID happened, I ended up unemployed. So, most people have a similar story or something alike. So it's not all woe is me. But we had to move to Denmark because Julie, who some of you have seen her on my ASMR videos or modding, she mods some of my live streams. She's Danish. So I moved back to her home country from Germany to Denmark, which is much better. Everyone in Berlin was mean to me because I'm a dumb American, I suppose. And I also don't speak German. So, I get it. I'm in their country, but yeah, they won't speak English for anybody. Very mean about it. At least in Berlin. And here in Denmark, almost everyone else speaks English because it's such a small country. They need a second language, and they're not, I wouldn't say friendly. Like in the US, I'm used to people being like friendly. And here, no one talks to you if they don't know you, it's stuff like that. And it just seems a little colder, but they're a lot nicer here. So that's good. And I'm trying to learn Danish, but it's a very difficult language. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but that's where I'm at now. And hopefully the journey and adventures will continue, but that's not up to me to decide at this point. So COVID, get on out of here. We don't want you. And hopefully this is, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm going to go now.